Good evening and welcome to another episode of Territories Talk. I am your co-host, Shaina Smith Archer. Looking forward to a very informative and interesting episode tonight. I have some new guests with me, but I want to first pause, give apologies for my other co-hosts. They're otherwise engaged right now. Mr. Christopher Famous, shout out to those in Bermuda. He's unable. He may pop in. Let me not say that because these guys pop in on me all the time. So Eden and Chris, they're gonna be late. If not, I will apologize at the end for their absence. All right. And I also want to thank our media partners that have come alongside us in getting the show out now over the last 12 months. Cayman Marl Road Facebook page, Montserrat ZJB Radio, Virgin Islands CBN Radio FM 90.9, Bermuda's Channel 82, Radio Saba, PJFE FM 93.9, and Barbados's CBC Channel 8. Thank you guys for helping us continue to unite and inform our OT Caribbean family. So let me start. We're going to have a short segment at the beginning because I want us to get the word out about a very important event coming up next weekend. So I'm going to ask my colleague and friend, Ms. Shirley Osborne, to go right ahead. Introduce yourself for those who may not know ma'am.
Oh, hi, Shaina. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Shirley Osborne. I'm from Montserrat. I live in Montserrat, love Montserrat. The two things that are most important to me are Montserrat and women's issues. Those are the two areas in which I do most of my work.
Okay. So let's talk about some of this work that you have. You have an event coming up that I'm looking forward to. That's going to also help to continue to inform and unite our OT family. So share with us some of those details.
Thank you. Yes, on October 22nd, we are hosting the third annual Montserrat Conference. We started in 2020, it's the first one, and we started the Montserrat Conference because you all know the story of Montserrat. We are in a place where we're having to rebuild and we've lost so many people. So it's really difficult. No matter which angle you take it from, it's difficult. And so we've been reaching out to Montserratians everywhere to just join the conversation, participate, come up with ideas and so on. And I don't have to tell you how government works and the civil service. They don't work as fast as the private sector. And so sometimes it takes some pushing and some prodding. And the annual conference came out of that idea. So we can provide information. We do research. We're a policy research group. We open up conversations on different topics. Last year, the topic was, how do you solve a problem like Montserrat? Mm-hmm. And because we've been getting better information, getting more familiar with the challenges Montserrat's having. And Dr. Daly, one of our members, suggested this year we reach out to the other overseas territories and ask them, how do you do it? How do you manage your relationship with the administering power? How do you succeed, or what happens? What were your challenges? And so we have invited all of the overseas territories in the Caribbean. So Bermuda, Turks and Caicos, Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, Anguilla, to talk with us. And we also invited St. Helena and the Falklands. And then for reference, we invited St. Martin, because St. Martin is half French, half Dutch. It gives us also an idea how the other territories are negotiating their relationship. And so on the 22nd, we have this conference. It starts at 10 o'clock in the morning, our time, and goes until 2 o'clock. And we have the three panels. The first one is what we are calling the rich countries, because those are Bermuda, Cayman Islands, and Anguilla. And those are compared to Montserrat, those are Montserrat's finding its way. But those have, we think, similar issues and similar purviews, perhaps. And then we have BVI and TCI together, because BVI is having now the issue that Turks and Caicos had 20 years ago with the administrative powers and the Commission of Inquiry and all of that stuff. And then we have Montserrat in panel with Falklands and St. Helena, because Montserrat and St. Helena have the same airport issues. St. Helena is much further away, but our 27 miles between us and Antigua sometimes feels like 1,200 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Falklands, there are issues. I mean, and these three have pretty much the same population, around about 5,000. But there are relationships that the Falklands has with Britain that Montserrat doesn't have. Things like education and health, which I think it's good for Montserrat and the other overseas territories to know about, and perhaps be able to consider or participate in or request or consider.
Okay. So who are some of the panelists that are going to be participating?
Well, I'm very, very proud and happy and pleased and grateful that you said yes. So thank you, Shaina.
No, Shirley, I couldn't say no.
Thank you. And of course, we have Chris, famous from Bermuda, and I have to thank him already because he was really, really helpful in helping me identify people and sort of create the ways this would work. We have Akira Misik from Turks and Caicos. Cayman Islands, as you know, is they're having some difficulties now, so we're a little bit uncertain about that. We will have someone, I'm sure. We're just not.
I'm sure we will. By next weekend, we're gonna have someone.
We're going to have somebody. So we're watching what's going on there. And then we have Quincy Gums from Anguilla.
Mm-hmm.
She's a new parliamentarian and doing really, really well. She's very much interested in things like climate change and so on. And from Montserrat, we have the woman who is the UK representative to England, Montserrat's UK representative.
Okay.
From the Falklands, we have the woman who was the UK representative, the Falklands rep to UK. She worked with the Falklands government for like 40 years. She retired in 2019, but she is Suki Cameron. She's going to be joining us for Falklands, and Janice Panton from Montserrat. And then we have a former parliamentarian, Derek Thomas from St. Helena. And then from St. Martin, we have a man who is Shuja Rif. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Shuja, who is he's an activist. He's a trade unionist. He's very much involved and engaged, deeply committed to the people on both sides of the line in St. Martin. Okay. So he sees one St. Martin. He also sees one Caribbean. So it'll be interesting to hear from him how Holland and the French do compared to the British.
To the British.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy, but we're going to talk about it on Saturday.
Yeah.
Well, I am looking forward to it. And I don't know if you mentioned the theme of the conference yet. What's the theme of the conference?
The theme is being a British overseas territory.
Okay.
Being a British overseas territory, what is it? What does it feel like? What is it supposed to be? How is it best? Is it best? What to do? What not to do? How do we want to keep it? Do we not want to keep it? What do we want to adjust and adapt about it? All that kind of thing. And very quickly, it really has to do with for me the two big things: identity and autonomy.
Yeah.
Who we are we Caribbean people? How much is our Caribbeanness is important to us? And we have the challenge: are we not British? Do we want to be? Do we all that stuff? And then just autonomy. My driver's license has to say Montserrat, not DOTC. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's thank you, Shaina. It's October 22nd at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's online, and it's all over social media and everywhere. I've sent things out to the radio stations and media everywhere I could think of, and it's free, so there's no charge. But and it's going to be live streamed. But if people want to participate in the Zoom conference direct discussion, because the panelists will speak, and then we'll have discussion afterwards. If people want to participate in the discussion directly, they'll have to register on Zoom. And we have Evite invitations. Again, there's no cost. You just register so that we know that you're coming on Zoom and you can participate.
Okay. I'm putting your Facebook page information in the chat.
Yes, thank you.
So that everybody can go there and get all the information that they need. So that's going to be important. So again, thank you for organizing this, because I think this is so pertinent. You even started it through a pandemic, so I got to commend you for that as well. to make sure that these important conversations do take place, and that we continue to learn from each other, because I think that's one of the lessons that we learned from Territories Talk, not expecting that that's what was going to happen. But essentially, we started learning from each other's experiences and realizing, there really is strength in unity, and we
Absolutely.
need to work now even more intensely towards, our little Caribbean block. I like to
Mhm.
refer to it as, start to
Yeah.
become even stronger because, all of us, I think, have the same destiny and it's very much
Mhm.
tied and integrated together. So this is gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna have some fun next week, Saturday. So I want
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
you to go on to Facebook page. It's the Montserrat Conference.
Mhm.
And please don't be like me. I keep forgetting the T in Montserrat. So it's
Ah,
Montserrat. Yeah, because of how we pronounce it. And
well, we do too. We very often say Montserrat,
Mhm,
Montserrat. So it's
mhm.
no
Yeah, so
sweat.
they're not gonna find Montserrat. They're gonna find Montserrat.
Montserrat.
Alrighty. All right,
Thank
Shirley.
you.
So thank you very much. And we're gonna catch up before next weekend.
Yes, we will. Yes.
Have a good
Have a
one.
good show.
All
It's nice
righty.
to
Take
meet you,
care.
gentlemen.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
All right, gentlemen. Literally now down to business. So tonight's topic, for those who were just tuning in and was wondering if we took a detour, we sure did. We just wanted to again support our family over in Montserrat with this important conference that they have coming up this month, and it's next week Saturday. And again, the information is in the chat for those that may be listening via radio. It's a Facebook page, the Montserrat Conference, and it will have on there all the information to register, or the live stream is. I think it's going to be live stream on both Facebook and YouTube. So, and I'll be sharing the information as it comes out on the Territory Talks Facebook page, as well as all of the hosts' personal pages. So everybody can get caught up from there. All right, so with me this evening, we have some new guests that have come on through to Territories Talk, and I want to welcome Mr. Cornell Riley from Bermuda and Mr. Mike Thomas from Virgin Islands. Good evening, gentlemen. How are
Good
Night.
you?
evening.
All right, so I'm gonna we're gonna start with you, Cordell. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about where and what you're doing up in Bermuda, and
Okay.
introduce himself, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I think I'll start by the moniker next to my name. I think I was in a capacity at another interview, and it's sort of remained there. So I'll start with that. I'm the chairman of the Bermuda Wage Commission, and we are tasked with determining a minimum wage and a living wage. The first part has been completed. We have settled at a minimum wage at $16 to $16.40 an hour, and that will come into effect next June. So that explains that title. In a previous life, I was a research statistician at the Department of Statistics here in Bermuda. And in that capacity, I also had responsibility for the retail sales index. And of course, I was cross-trained with the consumer price index. So I have some working knowledge of how that comes about. And in my day-to-day life, I am the institutional researcher at the Bermuda College, which is essentially their internal statistician, getting things ready for accreditation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a little bit on my background.
Sounds like a lot of fun stuff there, Cordell. I got some
I-
questions for you. I didn't realize the wage commission meant minimum wage, living wage. So I'm looking forward to hear more about that.
Okay.
All right, Mike.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mike Thomas from Total in the British Virgin Islands. We run a series of hardware stores here in the Virgin Islands. Been doing that for the last 30 plus years and growing, being involved in a lot of other areas in the country, helping out what we can, doing things that we can. But my primary seriously is making sure that our company survives, our country survives, over the next generation to come. So my company name is Clarence Thomas Limited. We're the we're the largest home center in the British Virgin Islands today and growing. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, sounds good. All right, so guys, the purpose tonight, like I was saying to you pre-show, is that we've had several conversations. And I think somebody's knocking at the door. Hold on, let me see who this is. Aha! Just in time to say good evening to the people there, Chris. Go right ahead.
Good evening to the people of the Caribbean. Good evening to people in Tortola, Bermuda. Sorry. Let me start again. Virgin Islands, Tortola, Guyana, all across the region. How's everyone this evening?
Everybody's good.
Good.
Good evening, Mr. Thomas. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Rolling with the
evening,
punches.
Mr. Riley. How are you?
Good evening. I'm fine, thank you.
All right. I can't really stay long because I'm here actually keeping the power on in Bermuda. So I just want to come on and just thank the listeners for tuning in as usual, and honor to have two guests on. One of which, Mr. Thomas. Hello, cousin. How you doing?
Mm.
Pretty
A
good.
giveaway. That was a giveaway. Okay, so Chris, since you're here and before you go, share with the OT family the news that we got earlier. I think it was today. You text me about who our newest partner is.
Oh yes, it's a radio station in. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes, it's a radio station, News and Views in Guyana. They sent us a message yesterday that they were from Dennis, I want to say, that they had been tuning in for quite some time, and they wanted to be able to air the show live in Guyana. So we are welcoming them. Sometime later on, we'll be having them on to speak about stuff that's going on in Guyana. But it just speaks to the connectivity of the region that although we are many different islands, and Guyana is not actually an island, but we are one region, and Guyana has, through their new president, Ephraim Ali, has pledged to help the region in regards to growing our food. So I just want to reach out, say thank you to the people of Guyana and to News Station News and Views.
Yeah, I was excited when I saw the text earlier today, and I was like, "Yep, we're reaching onto the continent now. We're good. We're getting there, Chris. We're getting there." All right, so we were just getting started with the conversation about cost of living, and I'm really interested to hear about what's been happening in Bermuda, because my first question really is about what prompted this commission. Because obviously, the need or the importance of having a living wage and not just a minimum wage is something that has become, it's on the front of everybody's mind, because with the increase of the cost of everything, cost of business, cost of living, it's all integrated, that we know that we would all love to be making a living wage, but that was not necessarily the case. So share a little bit about where things are in Bermuda. If you have an inflation rate, definitely let us know. We can compare some notes, and we go from there.
Okay, so the Wage Commission is a statutory body. We came into being in January of 2020. We started our work in February 2020. And when we went to our March meeting, it was canceled because of COVID. So we had a little bit of hiatus, but we continued to work. And it came about, largely because the Progressive Labour Party had that in their platform, that this is something that they will bring about. And so they've constituted a board. So I think there is about 6 of us in total. And we have been working at, in terms of reference, the initially the minimum wage, which actually is coming into effect in June of next year. It will be at $16, so between $16 and $16.40
So how does that convert to US dollars?
It's the same. It's the same. So I was just going to say, and that's just equivalent to 16 US dollars. And so that's coming to effect in June. And we are currently working on the living wage. I sit on the Global Living Wage Foundation, and we meet quarterly. And there are a number of countries from around the world that sit on the Global Living Foundation. And so that's how it came about in Bermuda.
Okay. So, Mike, you taking notes? That's
Oh,
like
yeah, I'm taking a lot of notes right now.
$6 is our minimum wage in the Virgin Islands.
$6.
I was about to ask you, how did you guys arrive at $16 per minimum wage?
Okay, so the process began. We got a lot of the data from the Department of Statistics. And in fact, the Department of Statistics had started this journey some years before. And they had came to a recommendation of, I think it was $12.50 when they finished off their work. And so the groundwork had been laid when we came into being. And so we just took it from there. And we looked at the data. We looked at who was earning what in terms of the lower income. And I think we came to the, based on the data, that there was about 15% that were below the poverty line. Now, the poverty line is a sort of a universal standard. And obviously, it varies from region or place to place, but essentially, it's based on half of the median wage. If anybody's earning less than half of the median wage, then they are at the poverty line. So again, there are variances in terms of purchasing power parity. In other words, what the money can buy in your country versus another country. And in Bermuda, that was the median wage was, I think, $30 an hour. And so that meant that anybody earning 15 or less would be below the poverty line. And we found that there were, based on the data, about 15% of the people in that bracket. So what we did to the government, because we knew that the work for the living wage was coming about, and having sat on a number of meetings of the Global Wage Foundation, one of the challenges that they had was that because the living wage is much higher than the minimum wage, there's always this huge gap. And so they were cautioning us to be careful of going too low, because you're going to spend your time trying to get the minimum wage up. So instead of making a direct decision for the government, we said, okay, we'll put it back in your lap. So the first, we gave them 3 different wage levels, and we took the view from the ILO. There's numerous documents from the ILO that we use, and we took the view that we're going to establish a wage floor. Because we knew the work was coming in terms of the living wage, where we're going to have to look at all aspects in terms of what a person needs to live by, including one of the methods that many countries use is called the anchor method. And I had a meeting with the developers of that method, and it looks at even the nutritional value of the basket of goods. So we decided that, because in the interest of time, because remember, we started just before the pandemic, and then we went to shelter in place and all of that, that we would look at it from establishing a wage floor. And so because the poverty below the poverty was at 15, and the recommendation from the Department of Statistics was at 12, we just increased that based on the rate of inflation and said, we'll start there. That will be one area where the government can start. And I think it came to about $13 and some change. I can't remember the exact figure. And then we also took the view that if you're going to establish it for the first time, do you want to have it below the minimum wage? Because, and in fact, I was getting messages on Facebook saying, isn't he the guy that's recommending a minimum wage and is recommending it below the poverty level? And so the second one was like $15.75. And then the third level we recommended was about $17.30, knowing that if you're going to have a living wage, that is going to be higher than that. And so you wanted to have a gap based on my sessions with the Global Living Foundation, that you don't want to have a wider gap and then having to try to increase it, and it becomes a never-ending target. So, or never a non-reachable target. So we recommended 1730 as the starting level. Mind you, because there are industries that will be paying less than the $10 an hour. That was the average. For that 15%, there are some that were paying, we understood, around $6-7 an hour, and so there's going to be this leap, but that's way below the poverty level, and of course the cost of living in Bermuda, which is what this is all about, is extremely high. We, in fact, according to the Numbeo Index, we are at the highest in the world. And so, having somebody being paid a very low wage at the bottom, the bottom end, makes it very, very difficult. And it causes and with the relatively free movement of labor, you kind of have a race for the bottom, because you're bringing in people from countries who perhaps are earning $10 a day, and they'll come to Bermuda and they're earning $7, $8, maybe $10 an hour, and they're quite willing to work for it. Whereas the Bermudians won't even apply for those jobs because the wages are so low. So in order to sort of stop that, the government had to take a stance, but being mindful of the fact that once we started, we were in the throes of a recession, and now into supply chain issues with the war, that you don't want to pitch it too high, and then you don't want to pitch it too low. One of the documents I read that was very useful to me came out of the Economist magazine, and they said if countries haven't learned anything about the pandemic, they should at least learn this: that they ought to be paying those at the lower end of the scale more. Persons like myself, as my colleague at the college often says, we sit off the fat of the land. When they transition to sheltering in place and working from home, we already set up. We can work at home, and we had our salaries being paid throughout the period. Whereas those on the front lines were paid far less than we were, risking their lives out there and being paid such a low wage, and if they couldn't go to work, they didn't get paid, and so I had that in mind, and this whole movement, if you will, of the Global Living Wage Foundation and the minimum wage is primarily set in social justice, so that people have dignity in their lives, and that's the sort of view that we took at the commission.
Wow.
Okay. So
that's interesting.
One of the things that's coming to mind, and Mike, I want you to kind of pitch in and give or side of or version of all of this, because again, the industries I think are very similar in terms of tourism and financial services. So I can understand the high in terms of the median salary, what's being paid, because likely, those are in the financial services and management and tourism. But then, like you pointed out, there's those that are very low, and that's the you basically bottom out once you pass, if you're below the poverty line, and that's something that we don't talk enough about, I would say, here in the Virgin Islands. But Mike, share with our audience, what your experience has been over the last year as a business person, because obviously that $16 minimum that would turn up the whole business sector here. So we're gonna get to that another day.
But not just throwing it up. One of the questions I was actually going to ask Cornell is, how do you get that past the hospitality industry? Because one of the concerns that we had here many years ago when they started addressing the minimum wage, right, which they're still trying to address the minimum wage here, is how it's going to impact the hospitality industry. For those folks with hotels in particular and restaurants and things of that nature, because the minute you're talking like $16 an hour, I mean that's pretty much where a lot of my employees off the floor are actually at. They're $16 and up an hour, right? But how do you make that transition without without disrupting the business. Because let me say this real quickly. One of the problems that we have in the Virgin Islands is the fact that we're so closely related and so closely linked to the U.S. Virgin Islands. So unlike Bermuda, Cayman, Turks, that are sitting out there in the middle, don't take this the wrong way, but in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
No disrespect, but
we got it.
Own, right? We literally have to compete on a daily basis with the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, right? And those numbers are very, very impactful. So pretty much whatever numbers you're seeing at Home Depot in Miami, guarantee you're seeing it pretty much at Home Depot in Puerto Rico and possibly Home Depot in St. Thomas. And then you're asking us, or the competition is asking us, to be as competitively priced as these guys are, right? And then there are all the factors involved with us trying to do business here and trying to get government to understand and address that situation and understand that they'll have to make some changes as it relates to the way we do business or import duties, etc. I mean, we have one of the highest rates into the, right, compared to our neighbors in St. Thomas. Moving a 40-foot container in St. Thomas is like $4,300 or something like that. And on average, you can pay over $7,000 to $8,000 to move the same container BVI. You know, our closest point from the US to the BVI is less than what, 2 miles? A mile and a half?
I can see them from my kitchen window.
Yeah, I like right from my list,
there you
right?
go.
So I like the idea of actually, having the minimum wage rest and everything. But when the numbers that you just quoted, government will have to take some harsh decisions where the BVI is concerned to make sure more of the revenues actually stay within the territory, right? So it's justifiable, right, to really pay a true minimum wage, right, as it relates. I mean, the minimum wage in the country is around $6 an hour, right? You know?
Yeah. And that just increased less than 10 years ago.
Yeah, less than 10 years ago that increased. We have never paid $6 an hour in minimum wage. I can't remember the last time we did anything like that. But then there's so many other things that are taking place that really driving the cost and increasing the cost of living. One of the things that we saw during the lockdown, and this is something that I tried to get across to our government officials, when we were on lockdown and we couldn't leave the country, nobody could go, nobody could come during the pandemic. More businesses opened up in this territory than I've ever seen open before, right? Especially on the food service side, right?
Yeah. We had the similar.
Yeah, and
food delivery in our place.
Exactly. Nobody couldn't go anywhere. So, and I keep saying to the powers that be, I said, guys, you need to step back and take a look at this, because they said when people couldn't go anywhere, when they couldn't hit Amazon up and they couldn't do all these wonderful things and flood all this stuff into the territory, people stayed at home and literally shopped at home and supported the local market, and the market grew. So I think in order for us to really address a true minimum wage in our territory, we're going to have to consider all these factors that drives the cost of living or cost of doing business so high in our territory. Because remember, again, I said, our major competitors are the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. They're right there.
And I think the key thing that he spoke about too that helps to figure that out was about knowing where your poverty line is, eh?
Yes, yeah, that's a starting point.
For Absolutely. Us, it might be that our poverty line is maybe a bit lower. So therefore, to bring up your minimum wage above the line mightn't be as drastic. But based on what he was just explaining, knowing that you can't set the minimum wage, or I should say you can, but it would be unwise to set your minimum wage below the poverty line. Because if it takes more than $5 to survive, it would make sense to set something below that, but and not right next to it either, because because of inflation that normally occurs year to year, it will continue to increase and persons will slide off. But it's very interesting because I was going to get into the social impacts of things like that, and you touched on it. In terms of what happens with imported labor and how it changes the dynamic of your society.
Well, I'll address the question that you asked, Mike, about the hotel sector, because we
Right.
have a restaurateur who owns a chain of restaurants on the commission, and so we were getting, you know,
First and
details on the ground, right, first-hand information, and in his particular chain, he would say that his workers are already earning above that.
Mhm.
Um, and so it would not be a challenge for him. Now, I did speak to the hotel, had an unofficial conversation with the chairman of the hotel association, and that was a few years back. And they said if it came out around about $12 an hour, they would be okay. So it's not coming out at $12 an hour. However, what the minister has done was stated that any organization that receives part of the wage as, and I'm going to use the term that we used in our uh, release document when we announced it,
Mhm.
who earns their wages by a service charge, not a gratuity,
right.
because in industry they speak specifically to a service charge. So that is added to your
Bill.
bill,
Right.
right? Then you can pay 75% of the minimum wage, and they can get the rest from the
Right.
gratuities. So, just give an example. Just before that announcement came out, there was a chain of restaurants in Bermuda that were hiring, and they said that they were going to be paying their staff $12 an hour. And so, if they added a surcharge to their
Mhm.
bill, then they would be in compliance
Right.
with and so they wouldn't have. So once you dealt with that, then if there was 15% that were below, uh,
Mhm.
then now we might be at half of that, maybe seven. So there's going to be some that's going to have to come up. But
And
that carve out that the minister did in terms of to the
Helping
hospitality,
businesses meet the line. Okay.
yeah.
yes,
But
yeah. So
Carter, let me ask you a question. Not meaning to cut,
sure,
right? But
sure, go ahead.
what is the import duty average in Bermuda to import goods into the country? What is
Well,
the
that's it varies. I mean, if I were to fly back to Bermuda, it's 25%. So anybody who's bringing in stuff at the borders, it's 25% of whatever you bring in.
right?
But there are different rates. Like food stuffs could be 6%,
Mhm.
8%. It's a lot low. I think government has announced that there are 25 items that will have duty reduced, but a lot of those items have already have lower duty, lower than the 10%. And
Mhm.
so they're hoping that by eliminating some of the duties, it will reduce the cost on some of those items if the merchants decide to pass those costs on.
So the
Mhm.
question is then: is there a kind of like a two-tiered system for businesses versus the average person bringing product back into the country?
I don't think so. If I were to import something in,
Hmm.
then I can. If no, I think you do. If you register as a business, you can bring them in. But there used to be a tariff, and you used to be able to just go and bring your stuff in based on the tariff. Um,
Mhm.
but I'm trying to think now because like you mentioned, bringing in stuff from Amazon.
Hmm.
If I bring in clothes, I'm wondering now, and I consent to be corrected that a lot of that stuff may be in and around that 25% level, but businesses can claim their stuff at the tariff rate, and I do know that. Sometimes there's been some cases where small business persons, who find it cheaper to fly off and bring their stuff in. But if they're bringing it in, they would normally attract the higher rate. I think they lobby, and now they can, once they're established as a business, can bring the stuff with them at the tariff rate. So I stand to be corrected.
Okay.
And perhaps somebody from Bermuda who is in there could put that in the chat.
So, well, I got a couple questions now that you mentioned that. But Mike, explain to our viewers out there, in terms of, we touched on, what some of the factors that have been driving the cost of goods and services since the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think it more or less aligns with what Cordella is explaining that's happening in Bermuda. But kind of let's get into the weeds of that, because we have right now we have the government extended a duty exemption. So everything is at 5% or lower right now, Cordell.
Okay.
And that applies to everybody.
And it's impacting government
revenues. Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
but again, the idea, and I want to hear from you, Cordella, as well, in terms of what have been some of the measures over the last, I guess, 6 to 12 months to address the cost of living that Bermuda has been doing. So, Mike, go ahead and you go first.
So and I'm going to speak from our business perspective, right?
Sure.
Because we've taken a hit because most of our imports, the majority of our imports are out of the U.S. anyway. And if I look at building material, lumber, plywood, steel, etc., those numbers escalated tremendously, right, during the pandemic. And we had difficulty even just trying to get supplies back into the island during that time. Those supplies have let up a little right now, but then one of the things that's actually costing us a lot of stress is freight charges. Like I just said, freight charges between the BVI from the US BVI versus US into St. Thomas or Dallas. The difference is so huge in us doing business, and now those numbers are starting to escalate. Utility costs in the islands have literally gone through the roof. I mean, take our business, our main store, as a point of reference. We were paying on average of about $22,000 a month in those costs, and over the last 6 months, so our numbers have gone up to around $48,000 a month, and all of it, believe it or not, more than 50% of it is all related to fuel surcharge. And so one of the things that we're trying to work with government with is try to get them to understand that they have to find a way basically to work with businesses in such a manner of trying to get the costs reduced. I'm not an advocate of the 5% holidays that government came up with, and I've made that very clear to them. I think one of the things that they should have done locally is look at maybe doing tax exempt on fuel coming into the country, and allow that to resonate throughout the entire country and impact not just persons but businesses also that's carrying the burden of actually moving the country forward. So there are a lot of little things that needs to happen, I think, for businesses to continue to be successful. And like I said, where you guys are out, because I have a lot of really good friends in Bermuda doing same as I'm doing, and I have a lot of really good friends in Cayman and Turks. And one of the things I'm always fascinated with them when I speak with them is the level of competition that they have is minuscule compared to what we're up against in this territory.
So they're more contained as a market, is what you're saying.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I said I think for businesses to be successful, and I agree with you guys, I think the minimum wage has to be addressed in the territory. But I can tell you right now, if you start talking even going to a $10 minimum wage in this country, where the hospitality industry is concerned, it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight. But I like talking to you because I've learned some stuff tonight that I think really needs to be looked at and even addressed from our perspective.
Yeah, it's definitely food for thought. And also just to let persons know, I went online and I found the link to the report, the Wage Commission report, Cordell.
Okay.
So I shared that in the chat, so that's there for persons to go and check out, after the show, to get a sense of how that process came about. Because you're saying it took about what, a year and a half? Because you said it started.
Yeah, we were mandated to do the minimum wage in a year, and the second year to bring forward living wage. So the living wage is taking a little bit longer, but we met our goal in terms of the minimum wage.
Okay, so while you're there, I have a question for you that came in. Hi, Mr. Riley. Is there a recommended average cost of living or livable wage for the region? And then, you already touched on what it is in Bermuda in terms of the recommendation.
Yeah, there's nothing for the region, obviously, because of the different um, cost of living. So once you determine what your minimum wage, I'm sorry, what your poverty level is,
Yeah.
based on that loose definition, and even that requires some work, but that's kind of the go-to
Yeah. It's
for
like the
the
finish
minimum.
line
Yeah,
right there. Yeah.
yeah, and that's where you draw the line in the sand. So there
Yeah.
wouldn't be one for the region,
Mhm.
and so we're working. So we've come to one for in terms of the minimum wage for Bermuda, and obviously there are other countries in the region that have a minimum wage. But what we are now looking at is a livable wage, and
Okay.
that is more aspirational. There's no country in the world that has a statutory living wage.
Yeah.
Most of the work that I've sit on with the Living Wage Foundation, they work with organizations, they establish it, and they encourage them to pay the living wage. So one of the challenge that we had was that, once you recommend a living wage and then you come, sorry, with a minimum wage, and then you come a year and a half later with a living wage, then what people who are not earning a living wage, how are they going to react to it? And these are things that we obviously have to
Look at.
take into consideration, and we're doing it for the first time. So so some of it is as you go, but having sat on the Living Wage Foundation and some of their experts there who've been doing this for quite a while, I'm able to glean from their experience.
Okay.
I see this other question: how has Bermuda's public transit benefited the cost of living for? Is that transportation? Specifically, how
I'm guessing it's the public transit.
benefited?
It's been helpful, I guess, towards helping persons to reduce their cost of living.
Well, it's not in effect as yet. So the minimum wage comes into effect next June. So we'll start to see then. But I think what it does, it allows people to get ready for it, and transition and see how they would do it. And you do get concerns. But one of the things I often say when I speak locally is, and I think Mike spoke to the cost of bringing in things. There's this Italian sparkling water that I get, and before the pandemic, it was $2.09, the same $2. During the pandemic, it went up to $2.99, so $3. Then with the supply chain issues, that same 1.5 liter of water that I used to buy for $2.09 is now $4.19.
Wow.
Right, and I'm pretty certain that most of that is distribution costs, right? And so when people say, well, how can you pay a living wage? Nobody asks the grocer, how did they find the money to bring that water in? They brought it in with the view that somebody's going to buy it. So when it went up to $2.99, I bought it. But when it went up to $4.09, I said, that's really ridiculous. I'm not buying it. And then I substitute it for another product. So that's in terms of wages, when you go say from $2, sorry, you were saying $6. Suppose you went to $8, so maybe you have to go from 6 to 8, right?
Yeah.
You're still going to get the argument about, well, where am I going to find that extra $2, and how am I going to deal with that? And again, if I wear my social justice hat, the thing is, you're talking about people's lives. So in Bermuda, where a loaf of bread is going to cost you $6, $7, $8, and you're only earning $6, $7, or $8 an hour, you're arguing about somebody's life.
Yeah.
And
and that's very key, because it boils on again to what kind of quality of life
that and exactly
the average citizen have in the country.
So and that's what the whole philosophy of the Global Living Wage Foundation is about. It's all about the quality of life. And so the minimum wage is kind of like a floor, so that the employer doesn't go below that. That's a starting point. And no one's getting rich off of that. I mean, if you look at the rents in Bermuda, et cetera, no one would really live off of a $16 an hour wage.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just what happened.
so, guys, we had to start a wrap up, but someone asked in the chat, posed a question about Cayman Island. What's the minimum wage? So I went online and I pulled it up real quick. And as of March 2022, national minimum hourly wage in the Cayman Islands is $6 Cayman dollars. That's $7 US for employees who don't receive gratuity, and it's for 50 Cayman dollars, which is $5.40 US for those who do. So you see, there's a big
It's a
There's a big difference between
Yeah.
the two of us. Absolutely.
yeah.
I would be interested to see what their
Again, the
They're-
poverty and the cost
yeah,
of living.
exactly.
Yeah. That's a really key discussion, I think, in terms of, one of those lessons learned or kind of like alarms that went off with the pandemic.
Yeah.
To alert our policymakers that, we can't do literally business as usual, because, it's gonna be like in 10 years time, you're gonna really start to see the effect of what the pandemic did to people's lives because of the loss of buying power. So you already weren't making enough to live off of, and then inflation takes everything up into the stratosphere, and therefore you're gonna have a very, your poverty class is going to expand. It's gonna become bigger.
I just want to say this before you go. I recall back when the Suez, I think it was, canal was blocked
Right.
for about a
When
week.
the tanker was sideways for a minute.
Correct. We were told then that down the road, prices are going to increase. So this happened beforehand, that prices were going to increase. So we're actually in the midst of like a converging three storms. That the effects of that, then the pandemic, and then the supply chain issues related to the war. And so all of these things are impacting countries at the same time, and no one could have predicted that. And so I saw in the States the other day that they were saying that after Christmas, when the goods actually did arrive, they were flooded with all this stuff, and they had to really have a fire sale to get rid of. So it's these kinds of things maybe with us for the foreseeable future. And when the war finally ends, we might see things to slowly get back to normal. But we are
not so fast, buddy. Not so fast, because one of the things I've been paying attention to, and I want to throw out there for all of us to pay attention to, is that a lot of these places where we're seeing these extreme weather events. So if it's not fires, it's flooding, and all of these things are affecting farmland. Which means now food is going to go into an even more scarce mode. And I think, we definitely going to be following up on our conversations about the importance of food security as well as energy security, because it's, based on what we have seen just in the last 2-3 years, it's like there's no certainty around anything anymore. It was never there, but now it's been exposed in terms of the vulnerabilities. And then, this US-China trade war, where they're now trying to put taxes on all that stuff again, is, it's going to get even more dicey next year. I don't know. We're going to stay hopeful, but, it's one of those things where we have to constantly be monitoring the situation and, doing our best to stay afloat. All right.
But I'm interested in that talk with the Ghanaian Prime Minister, who has pledged to assist the region in terms of food supply. So that's going to be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, that's definitely a priority. All right, guys, what's your closing words? Then we're going to bid our audience good night.
Wow, interesting conversation. To really be a part of that discussion, and would love an opportunity to actually continue that discussion at some point. Also, sure, because I think it's going to have a major impact on what we do here in the Virgin Islands. I know it's going to be a tough next year or two ahead, and things are definitely going to change significantly in the region, because we're impacted by what's taking place in the rest of the world, just said earlier. But I think together, if we stick together as a country and basically share ideas and share share different things. The whole idea of change came up in a conversation about a week ago with some friends, and how do we utilize the Caribbean more for food products for our island, the Caribbean in particular, right? How do we do that, and how do we grow more food locally? I think is going to become a major concern. And then as far as the energy side of it is concerned, sun is free. We just have to figure out how to really start using solar energy that markets, because with the war continuing to rage overseas, fuel prices are going through the roof, and as you notice, fuel prices are starting to rise.
Yeah.
Really, but I really do thank you for having me on tonight, and
yes. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure I send you the links again for those who may have tuned in late. I shared the link for the Bermuda Wage Commission report to speak about the process that they have recently gone through, and then there's a second part to it in terms of looking at the living wage, because again that is still important, and I like the fact that it's being done, because I know when we reviewed our minimum wage here, I asked the question, so are we gonna also try to determine what the living wage is? And it wasn't done at that time. So it's something that we definitely have to pick that up now again as a two-pronged approach, because we left it too long, and as a result of that, it stayed low for so long. It's hard now to say, well, if it needed to double, you couldn't, the kind of shock that would be on the business community, it would have been doable. So it's one of those things where we have to go back at it probably sooner than we would normally would have to, but it has to be done. So we got some new information, Mike, so we're gonna use it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even determining the poverty level in the country, I don't think we've ever really addressed that.
We've done I remember in 2011 there was a poverty assessment, because that's something that's regionally done. I think either CARICOM or OECS, they do that work along with one of the UN agencies to make sure, again, jurisdictions are staying abreast of what's happening from that social economic development standpoint. Because oftentimes we talk about economic development and forget it all has social implications, all of it. Right? So, well, Cornell, it's been a pleasure meeting you. Your words?
Well, thank you again for having me. The discussion has been quite interesting. We're on a learning journey, and we're quite happy to share the information with the rest of the territory. And we also like to learn from what the territory is doing. Like I said, the discussion with Ghana in terms of Guyana with producing the food. I'm very interested in a regional approach. My specialty is also in tourism, and there had been talk about a regional approach to tourism. So I look forward to these discussions continuing.
Awesome. All right. And before I go, I must say a big shout out to all of our media partners, especially our newest ones. So I'll start with them first. So we got a text this week, and News Talk Guyana, FM 103.1. They are now a part of our media partnerships that we have out there. So they should be carrying this live tonight, actually. And to all those who have been a part over the last year that have come on board, Cayman Marl Road Facebook page, Montserrat ZJB Radio, Virgin Islands CBN Radio, FM 90.9, Bermuda's Channel 82, and Radio Saba, actually not and yet, Radio Saba, PJFE FM 93.9, and Barbados's CBC Channel 8. So again, if anyone is tuned in from Anguilla, let them know. We would like to connect and, hook up, make sure we have media partners in all our overseas territories and anywhere else within the region. As a matter of fact, we're very open to having those conversations, because it's so important, as we've been saying, to be informed and do what has to be done in all of these regards. So, gentlemen, again, thank you on behalf of my co-host. So Eden sent apologies, and those that may have come on late. Chris was here, popped in earlier. And if this is your first time, and I think I have a first timer, I had him up, actually, I showed him. I want to send a shout out to Bermuda, to Ryan Smith,
and say welcome to Territory Talk. And we look forward to seeing more of you going forward. So we'll be back here in 2 weeks to continue to unite and inform our overseas territory family. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.